All right, so we have talked already about the types of powers that Congress has. We have talked about the express powers that they have, like what areas they can make law in, and now we are going to shift into the process, into how they make the law. So today we are going to be talking about the committee system in Congress. We need to understand how the committees work before we move on into our next topic, which will be the actual step-by-step process of a bill becoming a law. But first, if we understand the committees, that's a much easier way to build the lawmaking process on top of this. So today, our objective, what we want to do, we want to compare different types of committees in Congress. So we're going to look at the 4 different types. We're going to look at some examples of some important committees. We're going to compare the different types of Congress so that we can explain their role and their impact on the policymaking process. So what we will learn today is we will figure out why the committee system is such an important thing, an important way to make policy in Congress. All right, first today we are just going to look at the 4 different types of congressional committees. So we'll go through the reason we have committees and the different things about these 4 different types. In the picture here, you can across the C-SPAN thing at the bottom, what we're looking at is the House Judiciary Committee. So that's an example of a standing committee, what we might see. And in this case, this was, they were investigating and trying to figure out if it was time to impeach President Trump. So other people you see in the picture in the blue there, this is Adam Schiff. He's a representative from California, and he happens to be the chairman of this committee. So he's in charge of the House Judiciary Committee. And another prominent member of the committee is Representative Jordan out of Ohio. So he's a Republican on the committee. So he's in the minority in the committee. He won't have a lot of power passing laws, but will get to speak and question and have his thoughts heard in the committee all the time. All right, first, today we are looking at why we use the committee system. So here we have Senator Ted Cruz. Nothing special about him, except he is a member of several committees we're going to talk about today. But we want to understand why committees are used in Congress, and think about a group project, right? Think about our classroom. Now, if our classroom might have up to 35 people in it, if we were going to sit down and do a project together, that's probably too many people. In Congress, we're dealing with 100 people or 435 people. So in order for them to actually accomplish anything, we need to divide them into smaller groups. When we put them in committees, the House and the Senate, where they're normally too big to be able to actually write laws by themselves, when we divide them into smaller groups, we've made the congressmen more efficient and more functional. So here, the committees are going to be the place where the lawmaking actually happens. And so do the hearings and the investigation, because they can work together in smaller groups, and it's a little too chaotic in giant groups, the House on the floor, 435 people or 100 senators. Here we see one of the main advantages of using the committee system. We have Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez here. She's a member of many important committees in the House, and one of the benefits she gets, and all of them get from being on a committee, is they become specialized in a particular topic. So all congressmen, in general, we would call them policy generalists. A policy generalist knows a little bit about all of the policies. Think about what it takes to win an election. You got to know a little bit about taxes, a little bit about healthcare, a little bit about the economy, a little bit about foreign policy. You've got to prove to voters that you're good at everything. So you're not really a specialist in anything, but when they're on a committee, they're able to become a specialist in a particular type of policy. For example, in Memphis, we have Congressman Steve Cohen. Now, he knows a little bit about everything, so he can win over the voters and he can win his seat in the House of Representatives. But in the House, he is on the Judiciary Committee and he is on the Transportation Committee. And he learns specialized skills there. So he is a particular expert on civil rights instances and things like that, because that's where he works in the Judiciary Committee. And in the Transportation Committee, what's important to him as a representative of Memphis, he is on the Air Transportation Subcommittee. So he's very specialized in that committee, and he knows all of the details of air travel regulations, which is especially important if you happen to be the congressman in Memphis, the home of FedEx. So he has a lot of say in making rules that might impact FedEx, one of the main businesses in his constituency. So the congressmen that end up on each particular committee tend to become specialists in that area of policies. And their approval, like when we get approval from the Judiciary Committee, that signals to all of the other congressmen on the floor that that we should listen to them because they've heard all of the details there. So when the Transportation Committee recommends something, the congressmen that are not on the Transportation Committee, they look at and recognize the members of the Transportation Committee as the experts in the room. So let's look at the four main types of committees here. First, here's Senator Elizabeth Warren, another member of many important committees in the Senate. But we want to talk first about standing committees. These are the most common types of committees. If I tell you the name of a committee, chances are it is a standing committee. A standing committee is permanent, meaning that it is there for at least the whole term of Congress, but most of them are there for several terms. But at the beginning of each term, they'll decide what committees they're going to have. They don't usually change them. But a standing committee is either made out of entirely House members or entirely Senate members. So only members of one House in these committees, and these are permanent committees. Now, the role of the standing committee is to focus on a type of policy. So we're going to look at the list of committees later, and this will make more sense, but it's like there's a House Education Committee, there's a House Natural Resources Committee, there's a House Agriculture Committee. So they focus on a particular area of policy, and each committee is also divided into even more specialized subcommittees. So a transportation committee might have the air transportation subcommittee, the highway transportation subcommittee, and other things like that. So these are the committees that we're going to be talking about when we are explaining the law-making process. Next, we have select committees. These are the committees that we're going to be talking about when we're talking about special occasions or investigations or things like that. So a select committee is a temporary committee. It is made for one specific purpose. Oftentimes, this is for investigations, things that are not going to be happening all the time. So under President Obama, there was a House committee to investigate a terrorist incident in Benghazi. That's not going to be a thing all the time, but was a thing that happened under his administration. Under President Trump, the House has had a select committee to investigate Russian interference in the election. That's not a thing that we need all the time, but is important and happening under the Trump administration. So these committees get together to do a job, and as soon as that job's over, the committee is disbanded. People are not on that committee anymore. The main thing they do here is investigate, and they're looking into whatever. So we've had committees recently, committees set up to investigate social media. A long time ago, when I was in college, there was a House committee set up to investigate steroids in baseball. Not a thing Congress needs to be doing all the time, so we don't need a permanent steroids in baseball committee, but they could set up a committee, investigate the problem, and issue a ruling or something from there. So select committees also either in the House or the Senate, but they're not shared. Hey, there's Senator Lindsey Graham. So he is going to be not only a member of committees, but he's a chairman of a committee that we'll be talking about later. But all we're doing here is we're talking about joint committees. These are the committees we're least likely to be asked about. These are the permanent committees that they have. When we say they're joint, they have members of the House and the Senate. So they have some issue that both the House and the Senate want to deal with, and they work together on. So we'll go ahead and run through the examples now. These are not important committees. We're not going to deal with these on the AP exam, but so it makes a little sense to you. For example, there's a joint committee on taxes. Both houses deal with taxes. Both houses deal with the economy. Some of this other stuff, way more boring. A joint committee on the library. So there's a committee that runs the Library of Congress. There's another committee made up of House and Senate members that deals with all of the printing for House and Senate. So very silly stuff. But all we mean here is this is a committee made up of members of the House and members of the Senate. All right, and here's Senator Mitt Romney from Utah going to tell us about conference committees. A conference committee, this is on the AP test every year. Okay, this is always there. A conference committee is an important step in the lawmaking process. This committee is temporary, does a job, goes away. It has members of the House and the Senate. And the purpose of a conference committee is when the House has passed a version of the bill and the Senate has passed a different version of the similar bill, the conference committee forms to make compromises between those two versions of the bill. So the House gets to put some members on the committee, the Senate puts some members on the committee, and they negotiate and they make a compromise between the two versions of the same bill. So for example, this would not be a thing they were making, but maybe the House passed a bill that says we want a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, and the Senate passed a bill that says we want a 70-mile-an-hour speed limit. The conference committee would form, and they would negotiate, and maybe they would agree to pass a 65-mile-an-hour speed limit. So once they've made this compromise version, they send that bill back to the floor for voting. So it goes back to the floor of the House and back to the floor of the Senate. So even though they've already voted on one version of the bill, they have to vote again on the new version of the compromise bill. And the weird thing about these committees, unlike the other ones are going to have Democrats and Republicans, but the conference committees will probably be only Democrats or only Republicans, depending on what the House leadership wanted. All right, so that's the most important thing we're going to do today is we're going to differentiate between those four types of committees. You're not really going to hear about joint often, but you need to make sure that you understand the difference between the standing committee, the purpose of a select committee, and the purpose of a conference committee. And so we'll talk about some examples of committees in the House, examples of committees in the Senate, and see if we can't make more sense out of all this.